Save me. Take me with you. The alien girl pleaded with the only human at the market, and for the space of 3 heartbeats, he almost kept walking. His name was Cas Harlan. He was 34 years old, and he had come to the Vallagan bazaar for a coolant regulator. Not for trouble, never for trouble. He was a freight pilot, not a hero, and he had spent 9 years in deep space learning the difference. The bazaar sprawled across the dayside of Vallagan 4, tented in black cloth against twin suns that would cook the air in a man's lungs if he walked too long in direct light. Under the cloth, the world became red-shadowed and slow, a vast covered market stitched together from stalls and pens and crooked lanes that smelled of spice smoke, hot metal, and a meat stink he preferred not to identify. 7 species haggled here on a regular day. On a market day, more. He had counted 14 different shapes of hand in the first minute and given up. Humans were rare this far out. He got looked at. A Voth merchant with a lower mandible like a black sickle watched him pass and said nothing, because Voth never spoke first. A trio of melon-headed pond children pointed at his boots. A Krillari bodyguard at the mouth of an alley turned its helmeted face to track him and then lost interest when it saw he carried no visible weapon worth stealing. Cas kept walking. He had learned to become small in crowds like this. Chin down, pace steady, gaze set on the middle distance. Attention was a kind of currency he couldn't afford to spend. He had 840 credits to his name. The regulator he needed cost 1,100. He was going to haggle, and then he was going to haggle again, and if he still could not make the number, he was going to pawn his backup spanner, which was the last piece of real equipment he owned that was worth anything. His ship, the Drift Hare, was grounded in berth 19 with a burnt coolant loop and a debt against her registration. He had 31 hours to produce 2,000 credits or walk home on someone else's deck. He had no one to walk home to either, but that was a different kind of ledger. The slaver's platform sat at a bend in the central lane, between a Voth curio stall and a mercenary recruiter's booth. Slavery was legal under Vallagan law, so long as the debt bond paperwork was correct and the buyer paid the sovereign's tithe on top of the price. Cas walked past slaver platforms the same way he walked past abattoirs back on the core worlds. Head down, pace steady, not his world, not his fight. He had made it almost to the far side of the platform when he looked up. She was at the end of the line, crimson-skinned, the color of oxidized copper, the color of dried blood under old fingernails. Not a blush red, not a painted red, a deep native red that was the pigment of her species. Her hair was the color of wet ash and fell past her shoulders in a rope braid that had been braided by someone who cared about her a long time ago. Her eyes were the too bright yellow of a warning beacon, thin, bruised along the jaw, a shackle at her ankle, a shackle at her wrist, and between the 2 shackles a chain that tracked back into the wooden latticework of the holding pen. She was looking directly at him, not at the crowd, not at the merchants, at him. As though she had been watching the lane for a human-shaped silhouette the entire morning and had finally found one. He meant to keep walking. He had practiced keeping walking. His body almost obeyed. Then her mouth shaped the words before she said them, and he felt something drop in his chest the way cargo drops when its harness fails in zero gravity. Save me. Take me with you. She had said it low and through the slats. Anyone on the other side of her would not have heard it. The slaver at the head of the pen, a 4-armed Kelid with a necklace of colored finger bones, had not heard it. The Krillari guard at the back of the pen had not heard it. It had been meant for exactly 1 set of ears, and those ears were his. Her standard was clean. That was the detail that lodged. Not phonetic, not approximated. Clean, neutral, galactic standard. The kind you learn from officers and teachers, not from barracks. He looked away. He walked on. The Voth's regulator was 2 lanes over, in a stall built of iron rails and reclaimed hull plating. The merchant, old enough that her chitin had gone the color of chocolate, turned her head eyes on Cas and clicked her lower mandible twice. She knew him by sight from a run 2 years back. She did not speak because Voth never spoke first. The regulator, Cas said, the Terran spec one. She clicked again, reached under her counter, and laid a heavy, soot-blackened brick of ceramic and coil wiring on the wood. 1100. He had known it would be 1100. He turned the regulator in his hands and made himself look at it and did not see it at all. He saw a braid in ash-colored hair. He saw a chain that went back into dark wood. He heard 4 words through slats. "Are you unwell, Captain?" the Voth asked. Her translator gave the words an odd dry courtesy. "Nothing," he said. "You have looked at the part for some time without seeing it." He set the regulator down. His hands were steady on the counter, which was the part he noticed because he had expected them to shake. "Hold this for me," he said. 20 minutes. 20 minutes only. Then sell it." The Voth's head eyes tracked him as he turned. She clicked. She did not say anything else because Voth almost never did, and because she had seen this expression on too many faces across too many decades to bother asking what he was about to do. She put the regulator under the counter and folded her foreclaws. Cas walked back the way he had come. She was still there. That was the first thing. He had told himself, on the walk back, that she would already be sold. It was a lie he had used to negotiate with his conscience during the 100-meter return, a bargain offered to whatever part of him still remembered how to run from responsibility. She would be sold. The decision would already be made for him. He would arrive and see the empty shackle, and he would walk back to the Voth merchant with his money intact and a clean excuse. She was still there. When she saw him come back, her face did not light up. That was the other thing. He had expected relief. What he got instead was terror, pure and undiluted, the terror of a person who had spent 2 weeks preparing themselves to be sold to strangers and had, in the last hour, been given the first crack of an alternative. Hope is the worst thing you can do to a person who has learned to do without it. She had been surviving. Now she was going to have to try. She did not look at him again. She kept her face turned down. She was smart. She did not want the slaver to read her. The slaver did, though. "You came back, human." The Kelid lifted all 4 of his hands at once, which was the Kelid gesture for commerce and also for ridicule. His name, Cas would later learn, was Narcos of the Third Fin, and the finger bones on his necklace had all belonged to people he had personally killed. 2 circuits passed him back. "That means you saw something. Was it the big one at the end? No. Was it the twins? No. Was it the little scarred one on the left? She is cheap, human. She is cheap because her tongue is not all there, but she still serves." "The red one," Cas said, "at the far end." The Kelid's smile, if that was what it was, spread all the way around the soft, pale underside of his mouth. "Ah, the Vheyari." He said the word with the same inflection Cas had heard Terran ranchers use for a certain grade of breeding stock. Not an insult, an inventory category. That was worse. "How much?" "For you," the Kelid said. 12,000. "I have 840. The Kelid laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Then you are wasting sunlight, human. Walk on. Perhaps next season." Cas looked at the platform and did the arithmetic of stupid decisions. 2 guards at the rear, 1 Vheyari, 1 Kelid cousin of Narcos. 12 prisoners in the pen, counted left to right. The ankle shackle on the Vheyari girl was a pattern he had seen before on a freight run through the Casper lanes. A standard Thesic lock with a 3-pin cylinder. The chain ran back into the wooden latticework of the pen and vanished. He could not see where it was anchored. He said, "Would you take my pilot's license as a bond marker against the balance? I am good for the credits inside of a season." The Kelid tilted his head at that. It was a real question, and he considered it. For a breath, it looked like he might be willing to make the deal. Then something moved behind his eyes, some private small cruelty that he had been looking for an excuse to exercise. "Your license, human, is worth maybe 2,000. To me. To a syndicate who can strip the clearance codes, perhaps 3. For 12, I need the license, the ship, and you." The soft laugh again. "Come, climb up, sit in the pen. I will price you after you have been in there a week." The joke landed hard because it wasn't entirely a joke. The Vheyari guard at the back of the platform shifted his weight in a way that was not quite lazy. "Pass," Cas said. He turned and walked, and this time he walked with purpose, because the decision was made and he had stopped negotiating with himself. The platform had a back. Everything had a back. He had worked a cargo long enough to know that whoever designed a thing had to get supplies into it, and that wherever there was a supply lane, there was a door, and wherever there was a door, there was a lock that had been oiled fewer times than the front door had. He circled the bazaar's inner lane and came in at the alley behind the slaver's platform. It was narrow enough that two Kellids could not have passed shoulder to shoulder. The back wall of the pen was pine slats. The guard posted in the alley was a Kellid with his back to a crate, drinking from a clay flask. Low-light liquor, which was what Kellids drank on shift because it did not smell. The Kellid was asleep on his feet. Cas waited long enough to be sure. He crossed the alley in 4 strides. The back of the pen had a service hatch nailed shut from the outside with cheap soft nails. He levered them with the back of his multi-tool and set them in the dirt one by one, gentle enough not to ring. Inside the pen, the Vheyari girl must have heard him because when he got the hatch open, she was already crouched on the other side with her face close to the gap. She did not say anything. She lifted her ankle. The shackle was already unbolted from the anchor, which meant she had been working on it under the cover of her gown for hours, possibly days. Only the ankle cuff itself remained, and the tracker brand embedded in the outer plate. He killed the tracker with a plasma knife set to the lowest cut. 30 seconds of slow red light that made her bite through the inside of her own sleeve so that she did not cry out from the heat, and when the indicator died, he lifted her through the hatch. She weighed almost nothing. That was the third thing he noticed. She weighed almost nothing, and she was still trembling from the tracker burn, and she kept her face pressed to the hollow of his shoulder, the way a child who had been practicing how to be brave finally lets themselves stop practicing. And he walked her out of the alley and into the crowd. Behind him, at the mouth of the alley, a single horn split the afternoon. The slaver's cry. Someone had looked into the pen and found it short. The hunt was on. He did not run. Running in a Vallagan bazaar meant you became the only thing moving, and every head in the crowd turned toward moving things. He walked. He walked fast, and he walked with the girl tucked against him the way a father walks a sick child to a doctor, because that was the only shape of body language the crowd understood as unthreatening. No one stopped them. He moved with his face set to a calm he did not feel, and the crowd opened around them in the way crowds open around a private emergency. The Voth's stall was on the way. He slid the regulator off her counter and pushed a stack of credits across the wood without stopping. The Voth clicked once as they passed. The click might have been farewell, or warning, or neither. He did not turn back to read it. Berth 19 was 400 meters of covered walkway. By the time they reached the bulk door of the docking yard, his shoulders were aching from the way he had been holding her, and the horn behind him had been joined by a second, and then a third. And by the time they hit the berth, the whole southern quarter of the bazaar was calling itself awake. The drift hair was not glamorous. She was a Terran Frontier-class freighter of an older pattern, her hull plates mismatched from 9 years of replacement patches. Her ventral thrusters, charred from a bad atmospheric entry, he was still paying off. She looked like what she was, a working ship owned by a pilot who did most of his own repair and none of his own cosmetics. Cas had never loved her more than in that moment, because she looked unthreatening, and unthreatening was exactly what he needed. He keyed the ramp, got the girl inside, sealed the hatch with his free hand while his boots were still on the ramp, strapped her into the co-pilot's chair because the cargo hold was too far and there was no time for anything else. Then he jammed the burnt regulator into the coolant loop as a field patch, which was a sin against engineering and also his only option, and he lifted. The drift hair hated him for the next 4 minutes. She coughed, she keened, she threw an engine bank warning that he silenced by slapping the console, and she lifted. 2 pursuit skiffs rose after them off the bazaar roof. He saw them on the aft display, fast light craft built for in-atmosphere chases and nothing else. The kind of thing a slaver kept on retainer to catch runaway bondsmen before they got to orbit. They were faster than the drift hair in a straight line. They were smaller, they were stupider. He knew the moon. He had worked a run through its ring debris the year before. He turned the hair belly up into the debris field at 400 meters before thruster burnout range, killed his main engines, and drifted through a 3-kilometer boneyard of old mining wreckage on maneuver thrusters alone. The skiffs came in hot. One of them clipped a tumbling bucket frame at relative velocity and went to pieces in a silent, slow-motion flower of light. The other broke off and circled. Cas held his breath for 40 seconds until the second skiff gave up and dropped back toward the moon. Then he fired mains and cleared the debris field into open space and did not breathe properly for another minute. When the adrenaline dropped out of him, he was shaking in the way a man shakes after a hard fever has broken. He turned to the co-pilot's chair. She was still strapped in. Her eyes were closed. Her crimson skin had darkened all along her arms, almost to the color of wet ink. So dark he thought for a bad half-second that she had been burned in the lift. And then he realized it was not a wound. It was a response. Something her species did under distress. Her body was saying what her face was trying not to say. "You're safe," he said, which was a lie, and both of them knew it. But the words came out before he could find anything truer. She opened her eyes. "For now," she said. Her voice was tight, but it worked. She unclipped her harness and slid out of the chair, and then sat on the deck where she stood, because her legs did not quite want her yet. He went to the galley such as it was, and came back with a ration bar and a squeeze bulb of water. She took the water first. She drank like a person who had forgotten how recently, with both hands around the bulb, and watching her drink was one of the worst things he had seen in a year of seeing bad things. Because it was not dramatic at all. It was only ordinary, and ordinary was the part that hurt. "What is your name?" he asked. He sat down on the deck across from her, not close, not far, and he set the ration bar between them like a peace offering. "Enna," she said. "I am Cas." She nodded. She took the bar and ate half of it and stopped. "You should save the rest." "I have more." She considered that for a second and then finished the bar. "Enna," he said, "what are you? You're people. I have seen a lot of species. I have not seen red like that. Not like yours." She watched him with her two bright yellow eyes and seemed to weigh whether the question was safe, whether he was safe, whether any of it was. He let her look. He had learned in the last hour that she could read a face the way he read a star chart, and that there were parts of him she was now going to know better than he did. "Vheyari," she said finally. "My people are Vheyari." The name moved something in the back of his memory. Vheyari. A story from his first year as a freight runner. A bar story, half a bottle of something foul into an old pilot who had flown Centurus to Praxis before the resource wars. Vheyari had been an industrial resource planet in the Coolant Belt 80-odd years ago. Vheyari had been taken during the wars. Vheyari, people said, had been hunted out. "I thought your species was extinct," he said. "Most of us are," she said, "but we are not as extinct as they wanted us to be. Not yet." An alarm sounded behind him before he could answer. Long-range scan. Something big breaking orbit from the moon behind them. He turned to the console. The signature was not a skiff. It was a frigate. Corporate registry, not state, which was almost worse. The registry code pinged clean. Ostris Combine. He had heard that name too. He wished he hadn't. He punched the engines hot and put the drift hair into the long, slow dark between the moon's orbit and the gas giant it belonged to. A freighter could not outrun a corporate frigate across open space. A freighter could, if it was lucky and flown well, outlast the frigate's interest long enough to get inside a rock belt where sensors turned stupid and frigates grew nervous about their paint. The belt he wanted was the halt, a 3-astronomical unit-wide field of charcoal dust and iron chunks in the occasional abandoned prospector's beacon. And it sat 2 hours of burn from the moon's orbit. He did the burn. He did it inefficiently, zigzagging across the dead corridors where the Vallagan custom satellites could not see him. And he watched the frigate's signature on the aft scope grow and grow and grow. And then, 20 minutes from the halt, begin, very slowly, to fall behind. The frigate was not trying that hard. That was the part that unsettled him. A frigate that wanted a prisoner back would have burned harder. This frigate was pacing him. It was letting him run, which meant it had either given up or decided it would catch him later. And of those two options, he knew which one it was. He pushed the drift hair into the halt at half an hour of fuel reserve and cut mains and let her drift. The iron inside the belt fouled sensors on both sides. A frigate trying to lock on to him in the halt would have to come in close to do it, and close was where a freighter could hide. For the first time in 3 hours, he had a moment. Enna was sitting against the cockpit bulkhead with her knees drawn up. She had eaten a second ration bar. Her skin was still darker than it had been on the platform, but it was no longer close to black. She was watching him fly. She had been watching him fly the entire time. "Tell me about them," he said. "The frigate, the ones who were going to buy you." She did not look surprised that he had asked. She had been waiting for it. "The Ostris Combine," she said, "is a pharmaceutical consortium on paper. They are older than the resource wars. They own 6 refineries, 9 shipping lanes, and a hospital chain in the mid-core. You have probably flown cargo for a subsidiary of theirs and not known it." "Probably," he said. He did not tell her that the first month of his freight career, he had run a sealed medical shipment for a Combine-owned clinic and been paid in full, on time, with a bonus. And he had thought at the time that they were the good kind of client. "What they are, under the paperwork," Enna said, "is a harvesting operation." He waited. "My species produces a compound," she said. Her voice had gone flat. It was the flat of a voice that had said this sentence before, probably to itself, in rooms where there was no one to say it to. "The name in your standard would be Sarah Leth. It is an adrenal peptide. It is produced by Vheyari bodies only, in small quantities, under sustained fear. Fear of being hurt, fear of being taken, fear of dying, fear of losing a person you love. The fear chemistry of my species is precise and narrow, and the compound we make, refined, is worth 40,000 credits a gram in black market medicine. It treats neurological decay in species that pay well. It is also an intoxicant in very small doses, and that is the other market." She said the last sentence with the same flat inflection as the first one, and he understood that the flat was a kind of armor she had built around the sentence so she could say it aloud. "So they farm you," he said. "Yes." "They farm your fear." "Yes." "How many?" She looked at him. She knew what he meant. "I do not know," she said. "More than one. I was one of a batch of 6 when I was first taken. The batch before mine had 9. I was intake number 143 at the facility where I was kept. That was 12 years ago. They have intake numbers now well past 300. He did not say anything for a moment. He looked at the belt through the cockpit glass. Charcoal dust and iron chunks, and a small abandoned prospector's beacon blinking blue 3 kilometers off his starboard. He had known that the galaxy was cruel. He had known it with his eyes, with his practice, with 9 years of cargo routes through places where life was cheap. He had not known it quite like this. There was knowing, and there was knowing. "You escaped," he said. "Once," she said. 10 years ago. I was 12. An older woman, her name was Vess, showed me the maintenance shafts. She could not fit through them herself. I could. She sent me. I made it to a freighter dock, and I hid in a sealed cargo container for 19 days, and I came out on a trading moon called Perrin. I lived there 3 years. They found me. They take their property back. And this time, I ran from the second facility 5 months ago. They caught me again 2 weeks ago. They were taking me to a new buyer, a research consortium out of the mid-core, who had paid a premium for an intake with escape history. Narcos of the Third Fin was the broker. He was supposed to sell me this afternoon, to the buyer's agents, who were arriving tomorrow. "Why sell you today then?" She looked at the belt, not at him. He was not supposed to sell me. He was supposed to display me, so the agents could confirm me on arrival. The price tag on the platform was a deterrent, not an offer. It was an insult to anyone who tried to buy me first. Only a fool would offer for a Vheyari at 12,000. A Vheyari is worth more than a freighter. "I am a fool," Cas said. "Yes," she said. "You are, thank you." He laughed. It surprised him. It was the first laugh of the day, and it caught in his throat and came out hoarse. She did not laugh. She watched him laugh, and something about the way she watched him changed the shape of the silence in the cockpit. "Why did you come back for me?" she said. It was not a question. It was an examination. He tried a flippant answer first, about a regulator and a slow afternoon, and the answer died in his mouth when it came up against her eyes. He tried again. "When I was 10, he said, My sister was taken. We lived on a colony world that was between claims. A labor recruiter came through and she was of age. I was not. There was paperwork that said she had signed. She had not. I was 10 years old and I could not have read the paperwork, and I could not have stopped the recruiter, and I did not stop him. I have spent 24 years being the person who would have. She put her hand over his, her crimson palm against his weathered one. She did not kiss him. She did not thank him. She only closed her fingers around his fingers and held them there. The long-range scope pinged, sharp and clean, from the console above them. The frigate had found their belt. The sweep was a wide one, but it was a sweep, and a sweep in a belt meant that the frigate had committed. They had been found. He got them out of the halt on low thrust, moving from iron mast to iron mast like a cave rat moving through a lit pantry. It took them 6 hours. By the time they cleared the belt's far side, the frigate had lost them, and the drift hare had burned through 3/4 of her remaining fuel, and he had not eaten in 14 hours, and his eyes felt like boiled eggs. There was a salvage station at the edge of the Ostris patrol range called Burley. It had been a mining hub once and was now a floating junkyard where 5,000 people lived inside a string of bolted-together hulks, trading in parts and information and the occasional person. Cas had worked out of Burley twice. He did not love the place. It would do. He docked at an outer berth and paid in the last of his credits and a promise. Burley ran on promises. The dockmaster, a one-eyed human woman named Gertie, who had been old when Cas had met her 6 years before, took his promise and wrote it in a book and nodded him through. She looked at Enna once and did not ask. That was why you went to Burley. In the station's inner market, over a bowl of something hot that claimed to be noodle, he traded an old inertial dampener from his engineering locker for fuel and information. The information cost him more than the fuel, which told him something about what he was asking. Ghost belt, the fixer said. He was a pawn named Hoff who had done time in 3 different prisons on 3 different worlds, and had the clean conscience of a man who had done nothing morally wrong, in his own opinion, to deserve any of it. You are asking about Meridian 7. I am asking whether a person might take a look at it, Cas said. A person might take a look at it in the same way, Hoff said, that a person might take a look down the throat of a ribbon eel. It can be done. It has consequences. Humor me. Hoff sucked on a tusk pipe. Ghost belt, outer rim, coordinates I will sell you for 300 credits. Meridian 7 is registered as a biomedical research outpost under the Combine flag. It is a ring station 2 kilometers across, wheel pattern, shielded to about civilian mil-spec. It has docking for 16 vessels and a permanent security complement of about 40. Sensor coverage out to 5,000 clicks, 3 patrol corvettes on rotation. If you ask me as a colleague, what is on that station, I will say, nothing is on that station. I have never heard of Meridian 7. I do not know what you are talking about. I understand, Cas said. Good, Hoff said. Cas paid for the coordinates. Back on the drift hare, Enna was waiting for him in the galley. She had cleaned herself up, as much as the ship's one tiny shower allowed, and she had put on a jumpsuit he had found in a locker and given her, his jumpsuit, 7 sizes too large, rolled up at the cuffs. The crimson of her skin against the gray coverall was almost painful. How many, she asked when he sat down. He did not pretend not to understand. Confirmed at Meridian 760, estimated, possibly more. She closed her eyes. He watched the color of her arms deepen, then darken, then go almost black, then slowly ebb back. I thought I was the last intake, she said, 5 months ago. That is what they told me, that they had not bought new property in a year, and that I was a retainer, a pet, and there would be no one else. They lied. They lied. Her jaw worked. She put her hands flat on the galley table, and she took the first breath he had seen her take since the market that was not shallow. Cas, she said, I need to ask you for something. He waited. My older sister is there. Her name is Soleil. She was taken 2 years before I was. She was 14. She has been at Meridian 7, if the numbers are right, for 14 years. I have a woman there, Vess, the one who taught me the shafts, who is still alive if she is not given up. There are 60 others, maybe more. You asked me why I was on the platform. That is why. I was going to the second buyer because I had a plan to go back. Back into the facility. Back into the facility. There is a processing core. They have to process the compound on site because it decays inside of a day. The core is in a vault. The vault will only open to Vheyari biometrics. That is their best security and their worst, because they keep intakes on the station who can open the door. They keep me on the station, or they kept me, or they would have kept the next one. You have a key in your body. I have a tag they implanted when I was taken the first time, she said. I have learned what the tag does. Vest taught me. The tag is a breeder tag. It identifies me as property. To the vault, it reads as authorization. If I go into the vault and I bleed, it reads me as authorized, and the core is accessible for sabotage. And the sabotage, there is a cascade protocol. Vest knows how to set it. If we set it, the core melts. The facility loses the processing capacity. They cannot recover the compound from the intakes on site. The survivors walk out if the survivors can walk. And you? She did not answer immediately. He saw her think about whether to lie and decide not to. The vault, she said, does not open twice in a cycle. The scrubber protocol does not cycle for 4 minutes after a cascade. If I am in the vault to bleed on the panel, I am in the vault when the cascade sets. I am the one who does not walk out. Vest would be running the prisoner level. The others would be making for the docks. I am the one who stays. He said nothing for a long time. No, he said finally. Cas, no. It is my sister. It is 60 more of me. It is the only way. I did not carry you out of the Vallagan bazaar, he said, and his voice was not gentle. So I could walk you into a radiation vault. No. It is not your choice. It is not yours alone. They stared at each other across the galley table. Her crimson was dark. His jaw was set. The silence in the drift hair was the silence of two people who had, half a day ago, been strangers, and who were now fighting about a thing that neither of them had the right to give up on. He put his hands on the table and breathed out. Not alone, he said. Not you alone. We go together. We find another way. We find a cycler. We find an override. I have been on enough Combine hulls to know they build a manual cycler into every vault system, because corporate legal makes them, and corporate legal is stupid enough to assume no one reads the schematics. There is a way out. I will find a way out. She looked at him for a long time. If there is no way out, she said softly, then we walk in together anyway. The forgery took him 6 hours. He had done this kind of work before, and he had not been proud of it then, and he was not proud of it now, but he was practiced. He pulled an expired transponder code from a freighter called the Reliant 15, which the Ostris Combine contracted irregularly out of a courier pool, and he married it to the Drift Hair's signal ghost until the two were indistinguishable to any screener that did not lift the hood and check the physical hardware. On any hull that did lift the hood, he would be dead inside of 3 minutes. Anna coached him on the protocols. Ostris courier captains arriving at Meridian 7 were expected to speak a 30-syllable Combine confirmation phrase from memory into an open channel at 2,000 kilometers. He practiced it until his mouth hurt. He practiced it with his eyes closed and with her hand on his wrist, and the last time he ran through it without a stumble, she nodded once and said, "You will pass. If I do not pass, then we will not have to worry about the plan." That is not reassuring, Anna. I am not trying to reassure you. They did the rest of the planning that night on the galley table, with the Drift Hair's pre-flight checklist running in the background. Courier protocol called for 1 captain, 1 prisoner, 1 lightly escorted drop. She would wear the collar and shackles of a recaptured intake. They would be real enough to fool a screener and fake enough to come off her wrists with 1 twist of a concealed pin. He would wear a forged Combine uniform. There was one in his locker already from a job he had taken 18 months ago and never worn again. It fit him well enough. Combine uniforms were designed to look good on anyone. They had rehearsed it 4 times when he stopped, halfway through the handoff protocol, and he looked at her across the table. "You should sleep," he said. "We have 16 hours to the ghost belt. You have not slept." "I do not sleep well?" I know. She considered him. The cargo hold where they had rigged a cot for her was too cold for her biology. He had noticed it the night before, when he had gone to check on her and found her awake under 3 blankets with her arms wrapped around herself. Vheyari ran hot. They did not handle freighter climate control. Take my bunk, he said. I will stay in the cockpit tonight. Cas, take the bunk. She did not take the bunk. She took half of it. She folded herself against the wall side, and he sat on the edge of the other side and meant to leave, and she put her hand out, palm up on the mattress between them, and he sat down instead. He sat, and then he lay, and after a long time he realized that her forehead had come to rest against the hinge of his jaw, and her breathing had gone soft and steady, and her crimson skin where it touched his cheek was the temperature of a warm stone in the sun. He did not sleep. He lay there and watched the drift hair's telltales on the ceiling blink through their slow colors, amber and green and amber again, and he thought about every decision he had made in the past 24 hours, and whether he would have made any of them differently. He would not. That was the thing. He lay on a too small bunk with a woman he had known for one day, a woman whose species he had thought was extinct, a woman who was planning to walk into a death she had been rehearsing since she was 15, and he would not have changed a single thing about any of it. He slept eventually, for 2 hours. Morning by ship time came in a soft pulse of the hab lights. She woke before he did. He opened his eyes and she was sitting up, already half-dressed, pulling the collar over her own neck. Her hands were steady. Her jaw was not. Enna, do not say anything, she said. Not yet. He did not. They dressed. He put on the Combine uniform. It fit him the way uniforms fit, which is to say it fit him worse than he remembered. She put on the shackles. She fit them to her own wrists, which is a thing a person can do but should not have to. He did the ankle one for her, and when the click of the cuff closed, she flinched once. He went to the cockpit. She followed in the shuffle step that the ankle chain forced. The ghost belt filled the front viewport. Wide, dim, ancient, a 3AU field of dark ice and older debris from a collision none of the current tenants had seen. Meridian 7 hung at the belt's inner edge, a ring station 2 kilometers across, hollow, bone white, turning slowly against the dark. It looked, at distance, like the rib cage of something that had died here a long time ago. He did the 30-syllable confirmation phrase into the open channel at 2,000 kilometers. He did not stumble. He did not hesitate. His hands were shaking, but his voice was not. The reply came in a Combine officer's clipped standard. Acknowledge Reliant 15. Proceed to berth 4. Intake transfer on arrival. Welcome home, Captain. He held the acknowledgement button for half a second longer than he had to. Welcome home, he said to nobody. Beside him in the co-pilot's chair, Enna was breathing the slow breath of a person who was willing herself to stay alive for the next hour. Her crimson was deep. Her hands were folded in her lap above the shackles. We're in, she said. We're in, he said. The docking clamps took them. The prisoner level of Meridian 7 was not what he had expected. He had expected a dungeon. He had expected darkness. He had expected iron and restraint and the obvious violence of a bad place. It was white. It was white and warm and quietly humming. The walls were panels of clean medical polymer. The floors were soft under boot, the way hospital floors were. The lighting was a sourceless gold that had been calibrated, he understood, to keep the tenants calm. The air smelled faintly of lavender piped in. There were small reproductions of landscape art on the bulkheads at regular intervals. Dim pastels, nothing sharp. The cells were glass. He could see them through the glass. Women, Vheyari women. 40 that he could see at one corridor intersection, and more in the next wing, and more beyond that. Most of them were seated on low beds with their knees drawn up. A few were lying on their sides with their eyes closed. 2 were standing at the glass and watching him walk past with the still, measuring gaze of animals in a zoo that had learned what day the feeding came. Their skin was the crimson of Enna's skin, some darker, some lighter. The ones who were standing at the glass had skin almost black. He walked past them and he could not look at them, and he could not look at them. Enna's fingers, in the small gap between her shackled wrists, had closed around his sleeve. She had done it at the first glass cell, and she had not let go. It was not for balance. It was for the thing holding her upright that was not her legs. Two Combine orderlies met them at the wing's inner checkpoint. They were human. That was worse somehow. They were human. They were wearing medical whites, and they took Enna's transfer forms from him with the bored competence of receiving clerks. One of them looked at the shackles on her wrists. The other glanced at her face and looked away. Intake 143, one of them read aloud off the form. Recovered intake. Welcome back, property. Cas did not kill him. He would think later that this was the single hardest thing he had done all day. He did not kill him. He only smiled the Combine captain's smile that Enna had coached him on, which was a small, closed smile with no teeth. Vault delivery, he said. Direct. The orderlies looked at each other. Protocol, the second one began. Priority order, Cas said. He handed them the priority order Enna had forged on the drift hair that morning, on a Combine watermark scrap he had been carrying for 18 months for exactly this kind of eventuality. The order had her tag number on it. The order had an override authority line that was, Enna had told him, only used when a recovered intake was being repurposed for direct use extraction. The order looked real because it had the same loops and seals as every other Combine order either of them had ever seen, and the orderlies read it with the shallow attention of people who had read 10,000 orders in their careers. Direct extraction, the first orderly said. He did not like it. He signed off on it anyway. Vault 4, clear the passage. They cleared the passage. Cas walked Enna to Vault 4. He did not look at the glass on the way. He would see the glass every night for the rest of his life, but he did not look at it now. Enna kept her hand on his sleeve. At the corner to Vault 4, she whispered, without moving her lips. Second cell on the left. He looked. A woman with a tattooed cheek, seated on the floor of the cell, watching him as he passed. Her skin was dark crimson, near black. She was older than the others, older than Enna. Her tattoo was a Combine intake mark. Vess. He walked on. Enna's finger squeezed his sleeve once. That was the only signal. Vess's eyes followed them to the vault and then closed. Vault 4 was a single door in a soft white hallway, surrounded by no visible security beyond a single chest-high reader plate. This was the part Enna had told him about. The vault had not been built to keep anyone out. It had been built to keep property in and to keep property from touching the core. It read Vheyari blood as authorization because it had never occurred to the designers that Vheyari might reach the door as anything other than cargo. She walked up to the plate and pressed her right wrist to it. She had nicked her own wrist with a concealed pin on the walk-in. A small line of red, bright against the crimson of her skin, bloomed along the plate's red strip. The door opened. The core room was small, a white cylinder, perhaps 6 meters across, ringed with processing columns that glowed a soft amber. In the center of the ring was the core itself, a matte black cube no bigger than a footlocker, humming, the sound of a sleeping animal. Enna stepped in. He stepped in after her. She looked at him, and there was in her face a question she had not asked him yet, which was whether he was truly going to make her do this with him and not for him, and the answer was in his face before she asked. And she closed her eyes once and opened them and went to the cascade panel on the core. Enna, he said. What? The cycler. There is a manual cycler, right shoulder of the vault door inside. She looked. It was there, a yellow-handled wheel set into the wall at shoulder height, stamped with the 4-pointed Combine safety rune, which meant it was emergency hardware and that it had not been touched in years. It ran a manual override of the scrubber protocol, tripped the cycler, and the scrubbers ran immediately instead of waiting 4 minutes. She laughed. It was a short, bitter laugh. It was not a laugh of joy. It was the laugh of a woman who had made her peace with one kind of ending and was being offered, at the last moment, an ending she had not prepared for. The design assumed, she said, no one would ever trip both in the same minute. Then we trip both. Cas, we trip both. You set the cascade. I throw the cycler. We walk out together, or we do not walk out. The cycler is on the vault side of the door, Cas. The person who throws it stays in the vault until the scrubbers finish. 45 seconds. 45 seconds at rated cycle speed. In a live cascade closer to 90. 90 seconds. Cas, I can hold 90 seconds, he said. And he meant it. And it was possibly true. And it was also the kind of sentence a man says when he has already made his decision and is waiting for his partner to catch up to it. She looked at him. Her crimson had gone black. He had never seen her this afraid. She was not, he understood, afraid of the 90 seconds. She was afraid of what it would mean if he meant it. I will not leave you, she said. You will, he said. You will leave me. You will go open the cells, and you will get your sister, and you will get Vess, and you will go. If I come out, I come out. If I do not, you do not wait. You go. You promised me. You will go. He had not asked her to promise him. She had not promised him. They both understood her to have promised him anyway, in the silence that followed. And she turned back to the cascade panel with her jaw set, and she pressed her bloodied wrist to the inner reed strip, and she said, not looking at him, setting. He stepped to the cycler. Set, she said, throw, he said. She left the vault. He saw her go. He heard her boots hit the hall, and he heard the first alarm begin to ring through the station above him, and he heard, distantly, Vess's voice, shouting something in Vheyari that he did not understand, but that the cells understood because the cells, one after another, began to bloom open. He threw the cycler. The scrubbers began. 87 seconds in a white room is a long time. 87 seconds in a white room while the cascade alarm is ringing through the bulkheads and the core is going dark and you are counting, because counting is the only thing you have. That is a long time. He counted. He got to 40 and lost the count, and started again at 20 because he had built in a 10-second margin against his own panic. At 60, the scrubbers kicked into their highest whine, and the white of the room went blue around the edges, which was a warning color he did not know but did not like. At 80, the door began to unlatch. At 87, the door opened. He did not wait for it to open fully. He ducked under and ran. The prisoner wing was not the prisoner wing he had walked into. It was a riot. Every cell had opened in the cascade. The women were not running exactly. They were walking with the confused, deliberate gathering movement of people who had been in small rooms for a long time and were meeting sunlight for the first time. Vess was at the wing's center, hurting, pointing, her tattooed face calm. She saw Cas. She nodded once. She is at the docks, Vess said. She spoke standard, heavily accented. Go. He went. The corridors between the wing and the docks were not empty. Combine security had responded in force by now, a squad of 6, and Cas shot exactly 3 times in the run between wing and dock, and 2 of the 3 shots hit. He took a shrapnel round off the edge of a bulkhead at the final turn, a small spray of metal that put a gash in his left thigh he did not have time to feel. He felt the heat of it, which he registered as information, and he kept running. At the dock, he found Enna waiting at the open ramp of the drift hair, with her shackles off and her collar off, and her hands holding the handles of a plasma cutter that was almost too heavy for her arms. She saw him. She saw his leg. She did not scream. She did not cry. She got him onto the ramp. Vess brought the women after them in a moving column. Not all of the women. Some of them had been drugged and could not move, and they had been made to stay, and Vess had had to make that decision, and she was carrying that decision on her face as she came. 47 Vheyari, counting Vess. None of them was Soli. Enna's face, when Vess gave her the number, did not move. She had already known. Cas understood, later, that she had known from the angle of Vess's shoulders at the corridor's end. She had known from the empty look in 2 cells she had passed on the walk-in. She had known. They left Meridian 7 as the outer ring began to lose its integrity in the cascade. Behind them, through the aft viewport, the station unraveled in slow, silent flowerings of decompressing compartments, white gas blooming into the dark and freezing almost at once into spiral trails. The patrol corvettes that should have been on their tail could not commit because they had their own crews to evacuate. By the time the Combine got its ships turned around, the drift hair was 12 hours into the dark, with 47 passengers and a coolant loop that was crying, and Cas was unconscious in the co-pilot chair, with Enna packing his thigh with gauze and her own shaking hands. He would wake up. He would be well. But first, the Drift Hare was not a passenger ship. She had bunks for 2 and cargo space for 12, and they had 47 aboard, which meant bodies on the deck and bodies in the galley, and bodies rotating through the one bunk on a 3-hour schedule that Vess worked out on the back of a ration pack. Cas went into the bunk first because he was wounded. Enna did not leave his side. He woke at the midpoint of the second day to find her sitting on the deck beside the bunk with her hand on his wrist, and she looked at him and her crimson went, for the first time in a day, from dark to light. And he understood that he had scared her as badly as she had ever been scared, and that the fear had come from somewhere new. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she said. It was a poor conversation. It was a complete one. They made rendezvous on the third day. A cargo guild called the Martian Pole, which Cas had worked with 7 years back before the guild had decided they wanted nothing to do with the Combine and had gone quiet, responded to a coded call he had sent from the halt on the runout. The guild came in a converted liner called the Nightingale, and they took the 47 Vheyari aboard without questions, and they flew them to a place that did not show up on public charts called Sarah Minor. A green world, 2 suns, a town on a river. The Vheyari had been sending intakes there for 30 years, through the same guild whenever they could, in 1s and 2s, never in numbers like this. The elders of Sarah Minor met them at the landing field. Enna called the eldest by name, in Vheyari. The elder put her hand on Enna's cheek, and Enna closed her eyes, and the two of them stood like that for a long time, while the river behind the landing field ran on. Cas stood on the ramp of the Drift Hare, with his weight on his good leg, and he watched. Vess came over to him at some point. She looked up at him in the 2-sun light. She had stopped being the woman from the cell by now. She was a taller woman than he would have guessed, and her eyes were a gold that was almost green, and her tattoo was fading from the journey. "You are a good man, Cas Harlan," she said. "I am not," he said. "You are," she said. "I have seen many men. I know." She patted his arm, the way a grandmother patted a grandson, and she went after the other women to the river. Enna came back to him as the first sun was setting. "Walk with me," she said. They walked. Her hand was in his. The path along the river was soft, pine needles and moss and small round stones. The trees were a species he had never seen, tall and pale and smelling faintly of something between cedar and salt. They walked for a long time without talking. "Solai," she said eventually. "They moved her, 6 months ago, to a second facility." "I know." "You knew." "Vess told me. While you were sleeping? On the Nightingale?" "You did not tell me." "You were not ready to hear it." She stopped walking. She looked at the river. She did not cry. He had not seen her cry, not once since the market, and he understood that she did not cry the way some people did not cry, which was not because they did not feel it, but because the crying had been used up years ago on smaller things, and there was no machinery left for the big ones. "Cas," she said. "Enna, will you go back with me?" He thought about his ship. He thought about his roots. He thought about the 9 years he had spent alone in deep space, keeping the galaxy at arm's length, and about the 2 days he had spent in the company of this woman and how the distance had become meaningless. He thought about Solai, whom he had never met. He thought about a second facility, which would have 60 more women like the ones in his cargo hold, and a vault, and a cycler, and a man who could hold 90 seconds. "Yes," he said. She leaned her forehead against the line of his jaw. Her crimson was light. Her breathing was even. She did not say thank you. She had, in the course of 2 days, stopped thanking him, because she had understood that thanking was something you did to people you expected nothing else from, and she expected something else. They stood like that while the first sun set and the second sun turned the river to a long, slow ribbon of gold. Later, much later, when the Drift Hare was in orbit around a new world on a new lead, and the coolant loop had been properly replaced, and the cargo hold had been cleaned out, and the galley no longer smelled of 47 people, Enna was asleep in the co-pilot's chair with her cheek against the padded rest, and her crimson the soft color of evening. Cas was watching the stars. He was thinking about the Vallagan bazaar, the smell of spice smoke, the pine slats of the holding pen, the 4 words through the slats in a standard so clean it had been taught. He was thinking about the 3 heartbeats in which he had almost kept walking, and the strange small mechanics by which he had, instead, turned around. She had asked him to save her. That was the thing he kept returning to. She had asked, and he had spent the 24 hours afterwards thinking of himself as the person who had saved her. He had been wrong about that, and he knew it now, and it had taken the river and the 2 suns, and the look on the elder's face, and the 87 seconds in the white room, and the woman sleeping in the chair beside him to teach him what the wrong part was. He had not saved her. She had come back to the market for him,